So, Sue, thank you so much for joining this conversation, the series of Wild Truths, and where we are aiming to provide information about what's happening in the New South Wales wildlife rescue sector, particularly with wires, and share member experiences and factual information about what's going on. So, if you want to start just with an introduction of yourself and maybe a little bit of your history in the sector, and then we'll take it from there.
Thanks, Sarah. Um, so I joined Wise in 2018. I'd been living in the UK for 7 years, and when we moved back to Australia, we were living in a property backing onto the bush, and just felt like I needed to know more about wildlife if that's where we were going to live. And we hit a possum one night coming home from the station. So, feeling ignorant, I wanted to join Wires. Um, then for the first 12 months, because I was working full time, I just did rescues. And I felt like I was just constantly picking up dead or nearly dead bodies. And it was quite depressing. And that if I was going to keep going, I needed to balance that with some caring. But again, working full time, I did the avian course. And I had some amazing mentors when I said to somebody in my branch, do you know what? I just love to specialize and do something properly. And I love kookaburras. And they said, go for it. We have a shortage of people doing kookaburras. We would love someone to focus on kookaburras. And so that's become taken over. So I get presents, everything to do with kookaburras, mine for birthdays and things. Um, and I was really lucky as well. So I just thought if I join Wise and I rescue and I do some fundraising, then at least I'm making a contribution. Because when living in the UK, I really missed the Australian bush and I really missed the sound of kookaburras. So I was doing barbecues and fundraising and the rescues. And that's when I got to meet a few members in particular, where we would stand around when it was quiet and be talking, waiting for customers. And that gave me the confidence then to move into caring. And that feeds in a little bit to what then followed. So I joined in 2018 and I did the avian course in the second half of 2019. And then we had a branch meeting in December 2019. So this is leading into why do you volunteer to start looking after wildlife and end up being in a situation where we're fighting for constitutions and in the law courts? Because you don't join to volunteer to look after wildlife and expect this to be where you end up.
Mm.
Um, we had a meeting one December, it was December 2020, and a couple of our members were incredibly disruptive and rude and disrespectful to the exec during the meeting. And it was really unusual because I'd been going to the meeting since I'd joined. And it's usually, laughs and camaraderie and learning and all those good things. And I'd also taken along a new member with me, and this was her first impressions of wires. And it was just really unpleasant. And it got to a point before the meeting had ended that I actually got up and walked out, and Gillian came with me. And it's like, I'm not sitting here. And I wasn't the first to walk out. A number of people had been walking out because of the behavior of a couple of the members in particular in the room. And it was like, we're not just going to stand here and put up with it. And then in the car driving home, I said, I've got to write something about this because none of us want to be volunteers and be subjected to what we saw with the bullying and harassment to our exec team, who are incredibly dedicated people. And then I found out afterwards that once the meeting closed, it actually became really quite physical and abusive, and security had to be called. And so I wrote a letter the next day and found out that quite a few people started to as well. And it's that date in December where we look back now and say, okay, that was the start of things not being what they should be. Because we wrote to head office and we asked for the code of conduct. Well, like there was a whole lot of work. There was a lot of people wrote. We had a grievance officer put a whole lot of things together, and then start writing to head office and asking for the code of conduct to be applied and for an investigation to be done. And no matter what we did, nothing was done. Some of the exec went in and had meetings with head office, and asked for disciplinary measures and what was happening. And we just kept getting fobbed off. And this went on for 2 years. And in December 22, I finally got an email back from the chair of Wires acknowledging that they had not done anything for 18 months. And when they realized that they should have done something, and they wrote to this particular member, I've just got the wording I'm going to refer to. It was along the lines of, well, we didn't follow due process, so we can't do anything about it now. So it was almost like turning a blind eye, and that person, those members never had any disciplinary action pursued. But it was also then the events that happened within that 2-year period that, again, you look back with context and you can see it was the start of the journey that's taken us from the donations and from the bushfires to where we are now in the Supreme Court of New South Wales. So what else happened during that time frame was, so we had the bushfire money in the summer of 2019, 2020. We had this branch meeting where a couple of members started just absolutely being disrespectful and rude and all that to our branch executive, which continued after the meeting and all that sort of thing as well. And then it was in March 21 that we had the 101 program introduced. And then it was in April 21 that there was a raid done on our branch coordinator, Kate Turner. And Kate was somebody that had been absolutely instrumental in me becoming a carer. She was the person at the barbecues that used to say, "Go on, Sue, you can do it. You'd be great," and gave me the confidence. Kate grew up in Moree. She is a qualified nurse. She was absolutely the heart of our branch, where she was qualified and trained to look after any species. She was centrally located in our branch, and she was a centre of triage. If you had any questions, you'd go to Kate, and if she didn't know the answer, she'd know who did have the answer. So she was always there 24/7, and she just supported everybody. Anyway, she was raided. There was supposedly a facilities inspection about to happen or going to happen, and they took away the animals in care. As events unfolded, one of the particular animals was okayed for a vet to be released, and then it came back into care. So Kate's criticised of having an animal that should have been released, but in essence, it was a false criticism. And there's a lot more to it, and I don't know exactly all the facts. But what I do know is that it was not a facilities inspection. It was not done with support. It was not through mentoring or wanting to improve the way we operate. It was a real targeted attack on Kate. That's absolutely what it looks like. And we've seen similar instances with other members in other branches. And I think they were of a similar time frame. So you're starting to get this new class of membership, which none of us understood, that weren't to be part of our branches, that was pick up and drop to vets. And then you've got these really experienced carers that were so supportive of volunteers, um, being targeted. And then we've got bullying and really unethical and unacceptable behaviour being almost accepted by head office. And we started getting to a point saying there's something going on and we can't work out why. Why, if we've got a really well managed charity, not for profit organisation, why is this happening? Sorry, I should stop talking and see if you want to ask me any questions
No,
along
it's
this.
great. Keep going.
Um, and that was pretty much where we were. I think it was like, what's going on? None of this makes sense. And so it was in December 22 when I got the letter back from the chair saying we're not doing anything about this behaviour. Um, and then the last WSC meeting, and you put all these dates together when you look back, was early 23, May 23. And then it was June 23 when we saw the first proposed constitution for wires under incorporation. And it was like that was the aha moment. It sort of explained why so much of what we'd observed in the previous 3 years fitted in, because you could see all of a sudden that the board and management of Wires was seeking to have quite fundamental change to what the organisation was about. And the things that just jumped out when you already had this history of what had happened were things like members had to reapply every year. So here's everybody up to the bushfire stage, and I bought all my own equipment and used to fund most of everything that we did because it was just easier, and I did it, and I was fortunate, I was working, I could. So you funded everything yourself. You invested all this time and training. You get all this expertise, build up all your networks of carers and vets and everything. And all of a sudden you had to apply for every year as if that experience and investment was worth nothing.
And so one of the things that we picked up on in that constitution was that Wise could refuse to renew a membership of a member for no reason.
Exactly. So you apply every year and they can decide on a whim with no warning whether they would accept you or not.
Mm.
So that ties in because to something that I'll talk about. But after the last SGM, I received a notice of concern. And basically, the notice of concern was if you choose to stay a member of WISE, we'll consider it. So it was basically a veiled threat. If we don't like you, you're not going to be a member. So they were setting themselves up for all of this. There were no branches mentioned in the Constitution. So everything about branches was pushed to a bylaw, which means that that can be changed at any time by the board without any consultation to the members. They only need 50 members to be an organisation.
And at the time, those bylaws were not available for anyone to see. They were not written.
No, the whole object of the organisation had nothing to do with the rescue and rehabilitation of wildlife. WISE was moving from a state-based, volunteer-based organisation focused on wildlife to a national environmental organisation that ideally would probably have no volunteers, that only needed 50 members, which could essentially be staff and board members if they wanted to, or key influencers. So the whole fundamental of the organisation was changing. And then if you reflect back, you'd say, oh, so that's why they want to get rid of people like Kate, because they don't want people that others will follow. They were trying to divide and conquer, and they were trying to effectively get rid of the North Shore branch, because the North Shore branch was one of the biggest and probably most active branches within WISE. We were really good at fundraising. We were really cohesive. So by trying to take Kate out of the branch, they were effectively trying to take the heart out of it all. And to some extent, they were successful. So when Kate settled the legal dispute and left Wires, basically all our possum carers went as well. Anybody that was on the exec and suffered the abuse and lack of support left Wires. So they did succeed in cutting a big hole into our branch. And that was obviously what they were trying to do. Um, so
And
when
that's
that came,
ultimately devastating for our wildlife. Not to mention the members.
well, we get phone calls now as if anybody can pick up possums, and we just have to say, call Sydney Wildlife. We just don't
Mm,
have possum carers. We're struggling to have a possum coordinator, and yet that used to be such a strong part of what we did.
mm.
So Wire's branding, reputation, and everything has been so badly tarnished because of that. Um, and then I think what came out of it too is we just then wanted to fight. It all made sense. And it was like, how do we talk to each other? And you start to realize that Wire's head office had been very good at keeping us separate in our own little branches, and there
Mm.
hadn't been a lot of cohesion. They stopped all the WSC meetings at that point. Um, and so we had to find smarter ways to try and communicate. I think we were relieved that 75% of the vote didn't go through, obviously. Um, and then we just had to bunker down and know that it was going to come at us again. The things that made you really question the ethics and integrity of the organisation were, for example, how they proposed to set up the new board. And initially, it came out that there was going to be only 3 of the 9 board members that could be voted on by members of WISE. And we were told that that's absolutely standard for not for profits. And the example that was held up to us at the time was the Fred Hollows Foundation. So we were the ones that had to keep digging and digging and finding out what was in their constitution and going back to WISE and saying, what you're telling us isn't true. They allow more than 50% of the board members to be voted by their members. And it was only when we kept putting things like that up that we got some minor changes. But then when they came out with the second constitution, they still hadn't addressed the issues like branches. The object of the company still wasn't rescue and rehabilitation. We'd fought to have 5 of the board members to be voted in by members, and I've just got to try and remember the detail. But the way that can fundamentally work is that they put up 5 people and you vote yes or no. And there's no other options if you want to fill those board positions. So while they put it up to members and say, but you'll have a vote on 5 positions, you actually don't have a vote because they run the nominations committee. They go out and choose who they want to put up. They put those people up, and it's either you have that or nothing.
Mm.
So, and I think this starts to get really quite technical, and most members don't want to play in this space.
Mm-mm.
They just want to trust the organisation and focus on the wildlife, which is why we all joined. So it's a really fine line to how you communicate the importance of this and try and do it in a way that people understand the importance of what we're fighting for without people glazing over and seeing us as troublemakers.
Mm.
And that's one of the hardest things. It's been, I'm going to get emotional, it's been so tempting just to walk away because you get tired of it and you don't join for this reason. Sorry.
Mm. No, that's okay.
Um, so the only reason I'm still here is because of so many good people who are fighting the fight. And it's a little bit like we're still here because Kate should never have been treated the way she's treated. We
Mm.
should never have lost all the people that we've lost. And the way that Wires is still progressing is so unethical and lacks integrity that it's very hard to turn a blind eye and walk away. So in February for the 24th, the second SGM, we knew the case law. We wanted to communicate with other members. We wanted a list of the members so we could put forward what we believed was right. We wrote to them. We had lawyers write to them. And our constitution says you should be able to obtain a copy of the members' register. I got so far as to agree a time where I could go to head office to have a look at the register personally, but I should have been able to get a copy of it, and they refused.
Because that's in the Constitution, isn't it? That anyone can request that. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it was almost like the copy that they'd given me had been deliberately scrambled. There was not in alphabetical order. There was no order to it whatsoever. And I was allowed to stand there and look at it while somebody watched me. I wasn't allowed to take photos, take copies, do absolutely anything. You just treated like you're, dirt under their feet, basically.
Mm.
And again, that makes you bunker down because it's a bit like they're obviously trying to hide something if they're behaving like this. If it was fair and ethical, they wouldn't be doing it. Big deep breath. So we were relieved when, obviously, again, the Constitution didn't get through. And then, with legal advice, a group of members started to want to call their own meeting with their own resolutions. And it's not like we're against change. We absolutely know WISE needs to incorporate, but our advice had been that we could incorporate under the 2007 Constitution with minor tweaks to bring it in line with the Corporations Act from an association. And we couldn't understand why this wasn't just the way forward. And we actually don't think that the 2007 Constitution is great. It's now 20 years ago, and it definitely needs to be updated. And with the windfall of donations that WISE gained, there is definitely opportunities for change for the organisation to improve. Mm-hmm. So all of those things are positives, but we need to do it with transparent, strong leadership in a collaborative manner with members, not this everything behind closed doors, no explanation of why things are happening, only one way forward and a complete change of direction for the organisation. So it's the way it's being done. It's not necessarily that we're against change.
I think a very, very common theme in what everybody is saying so far is that the lack of support for members and the absence of communication and transparency is the biggest problem, because everyone wants to see WISE remain and reform to get back to the foundations of when it was set up, to be for members, run by members, for the benefit of wildlife rescue throughout the state. But that seems to be, there's a big disconnect.
It's a huge disconnect. I mean, for us, it's a bit like, well, hold on, how can Sydney Wildlife, which has so little funding, have a mobile vet van available 3 days a week that WISE members have to take their animals to get x-rays and things like that, when WISE has so much funding? Why don't we have these centres of expertise with wildlife vets and facilities that we can be using? It just seems crazy when that is such a basic element of where we see a weakness in the services we can support wildlife with. It could just be so different, Sarah. It's so frustrating. And I'm probably one of the worst people because my background is like 40 years in corporate life. I've worked for some amazing large organisations. I've actually been on teams to drive change. I've got an MBA. I know all about strategy. I know all about change. And you sit here and you think, I have seen organisations do this good and bad over and over again, and I have never, ever, ever seen it as bad as this. The members then tried to run our own SGM, and we were the ones that actually said, let's just separate the incorporation out from the Constitution. And we put our Constitution forward, and the really sad part is the meeting got hijacked. and the communications that was to go out to members was changed by head office. The wording of the resolutions got changed. The way the voting was supposed to be structured got changed. So when head office then came out on, I think it was the 9th of September 24, with that email that said, click if you want to stay a member. Everybody just about fell over, I think, that they would have the audacity to do something which was so obviously illegal under the Constitution, under the Corporations Act.
Well, it seemed like blackmail, really, didn't it?
I'm trying to choose my words a little bit carefully, but pretty much yes. And again, the legal advice of the people that I'm sort of working with, wires were told by legal counsel that it was illegal.
Many members who wrote to them just to let them know that what they were doing was not legal, apart from the ethical concerns. It just wasn't legal.
And at least 140 of us wrote in and said, we accept the $1 guarantee of company limited by guarantee, but we're not going to accept your constitution. And all that seems to have just been ignored and all that sort of thing. What also happened, though, for me, which was quite funny, is everybody, after about the first day when I'd gone in and had a look at the email, I stopped getting all the follow-up emails asking me to click and vote. And so I wrote to members and said, why aren't I getting all these email reminders to click and vote? And they came back and said, because you've already accepted it. And I said, no, I haven't. I would never accept this. Take me off it, which they subsequently did. But what that did is say, hold on a minute. Where's the integrity in this whole voting system? If you can let that go through, which I obviously would never have accepted, then the whole thing to me just again has no integrity. So the processes and systems and all the rest of it. So obviously that then led to the legal action in the Supreme Court now that's being led by Gary Henderson and Katrina. So we had those letters in September, and then we've obviously the court action was lodged in November. When the email came out on the 17th of April, like that 6 o'clock before the Easter long weekend, and they acknowledged that they'd done the wrong thing, I think there is a feeling of, well, thank goodness they've now got some legal advice which is telling them to do the right thing, because we were writing to Pro Legis and everything else, and everybody was just ignoring us. We would love to see the advice from Pro Legis, because we'd like to know how much of it was the Pro Legis versus how much the board were acting independently. And I think that's really important. But the concern is that, having acknowledged we need to go back to the 2007 Constitution, they're not really doing it. So we still don't. So what was interesting is, so as a chair of a branch, the chairs advisory groups had been meeting since September, October 24. But if you're a chair of a branch but still an authorised person, then you weren't invited. When the email came out from April, the authorised persons were then invited to the chairs advisory group. But the chairs advisory group doesn't seem to actually be achieving anything. And when I joined and I questioned, well, what's the purpose of it? And I said, but aren't we meant to be going back to the WSC meetings? The explanation I was given was that WSC meetings will refer to the board, and the chair's advisory group meetings will confer with the chair. But if you ask for simple things like, well, can we have an organisational chart of the head office so we know who's doing what and who reports to who, we can't get copies of anything like that. And then you say, well, that's so fundamental to any organisation. Why wouldn't the chairs have that? And there's been a whole lot of questions that have been sent in through the Chairs Advisory Group, and we're not getting any answers. So it's got absolutely no teeth whatsoever, but it's continuing. Versus the State Council, which was fundamental to the 2007 Constitution, has still not been reinstated. So that's just one of the most fundamental basics of it. But the Constitution that they've now put up for us to look at even though it's minor amendments to the 2007 Constitution, still has some really real concerns, particularly around the way the gift fund is managed, Clause 26.
Mm.
And the other thing is about how they're actually even approaching these meetings to the point where there's they should be ruled invalid. There's about a dozen reasons of things that they're not doing right and how they've approached the meetings. And I can go into all the detail. But you would think that having this board that has now for 4 or 5 years been treating members so badly, has not really been concerned about the wildlife, that's not been their focus at all, have has had to admit that they lodged a constitution illegally and that the courts is telling them they have to rectify it, still don't seem to see any remorse or take any responsibility for still doing the right thing.
Yeah, there's been no accountability from what anyone's seen, really, for all of it.
No, and I just wish, this sounds terrible, but I wish more members would actually just take the time to get across some of this. Like even in the
Mm.
chair's advisory group, I try to raise a couple of comments without being too controversial. And the response I get is, well, we only have one authorised person in our branch. We don't see that as an issue. We're just going on as life as normal. And you say, look, I envy you, but don't you realise that you could all be cast aside as members, that branches may no longer exist? You may no longer have a vote in the future. Is this how you want the organisation to be? If you
Mm.
can't even get questions now about resources for datas or anything like that, where do you think this will go in the future?
Mm.
And I think it's just sad that more people aren't aware, because we keep hearing stories, and it's probably because people are reaching out. But there are members that are still having raids on their property, that are still being accused of cruelty to animals and having to prove otherwise, etc., etc. I mean, you're across it, Sarah, I know.
Yeah, I've heard countless stories along the way. It's very sad because, nobody wants to be involved in this political chaos. No one wants to be doing this. Well, all the members want to see is a functional organisation that moves forward in a positive direction. And, members want to be heard and taken along this journey of change to see, why is and in many ways and can be an amazing organisation. They have a great reputation because of the carers and rescuers who are out there doing the work, undoubtedly. And, most of the people are doing the right thing. There's amazing work being done and a lot of collaboration, but there seems to be this wall that they come up against.
And we're also hearing more and more that they've got a massive staff turnover in head office.
Yes.
More and more
Oh,
people are leaving.
yes.
I've stopped caring now because I'm a target. So I've taken myself out of caring, so I can't be accused of welfare, made up welfare issues.
And that's very sad with all of your knowledge and experience and mentorship and all of those things that
And
the
I miss
community's
it.
missing out on. Yeah.
Yeah, I really miss it.
Devastating for
But
you.
But what was also happening, when I was still doing it, is you go to members of the public and they would start saying, I've been trying to get hold of wires. It took me so many phone calls. They'd had wrong advice from the rescue office. People, you could see the trend. While we had frustration, but you stayed professional when you went to somebody's place to rescue or to pick up an animal or something, the general public are picking up on all of this. So you've got this amazing organisation with a reputation that's been built up over years, with fantastic volunteers that have made it what it is. But it's like I even went to a round table. I was away for the ones in Sydney, so I went to one up in the Northern Tablelands. And I met all these ex-wires carers up there that have gone into another group. And they were so frustrated. But what was also interesting is they were getting more from the donations from wires by being outside wires than what we were almost seeing being given to our own members.
Wow.
So that
Mm.
starts to raise questions and things as well.
Mm.
So I think the question is, where does this take us all and how are we
Mm.
going to get there? And I'm a bit like you. I just think there is so much hope still for the organization. I haven't given up on it, otherwise I would have walked away. We just need really strong leadership with
Yes.
integrity and ethics that approaches it with collaboration
Yes.
and brings, so it's not that we don't want change. I think we do want change. We certainly want a lot of change from where we are at the moment. But there's a lot of ways to make change. And one of the challenges with an organization like Wise is when you've got 3 or 4 thousand members with a complete diverse range of skill sets and opinions, you are never going to be able to bring 100% of the people with you 100% of the time. And there are a lot of people that don't want to know and just want to get on doing it. But if you can stand there and get the majority of people to come with you and explain why things are being done the way they are in an open, transparent manner, um, I just think it would change this organization. I mean, to be fair, I think there's been some really good work done on fundraising. They've now built up, a sponsor partner base. Some of the branding is terrific. It's just a shame that when you take off that veneer, which is that social profile that the public are seeing, underneath it, it's just completely different.
Yeah, the dysfunction is astounding, really, with all of that.
So this is a little bit about then, and stop me if somebody else has already been going through this, but how do we move from where we are to where we want to get to?
Good point.
And we need to change. I'm choosing my words carefully. We need to change them, obviously, the senior leadership and management of the organisation. There's that old saying that the fish rots from the head. I think that's what it says. So we
Sounds
need
right.
so we need to change that. Um, and I think there's going to be we've got to get the people out first and just stabilize it. We've got to start with really then transparent and open communication and then start the change process with people where we can build trust and integrity and people
Mm,
are confident with ethics. One of the things along the way that I have found incredibly frustrating is reaching out to so many authorities and no one stepping up to support the volunteers with wires.
mm.
And members have been told that a lot of authorities won't step in until we win the legal battle. So hopefully that might change. And I think there's definitely work to be done in the not-for-profit sector around making sure things like this can't occur anywhere. There needs to be much more accountability to the board and senior management. But if we could change it at the top, I think the journey to a positive future could happen quite quickly. It's about working out what we get rid of and what we keep, not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, and really getting back to a solid foundation.
Yeah, there needs to be a constructive conversation and interaction between the board or the executive and the members where they're respected and at the moment they seem to be treated with disdain and
There's a couple of really fundamentals. First of all, I think that outside board members could be healthy. So I
yes.
think, in essence, that's not something we're against, but it's about how they're selected and those sorts of things. And one of the things I really struggle with is what is the role of the welfare team at the moment? So
Mm.
even at the chair's advisory group, we were told if you've got any inquiries as a member, you must go to the volunteer service team. But what if it's an animal welfare issue? Well, it doesn't matter. You've got to go to the welfare team. And I'm hearing that the welfare team are sending people out to inspect facilities, but they don't even know anything about the actual animals for whom those facilities are intended. I'm hearing of particular facilities being approved where others in the species team don't think it should have been approved, and the other things that are absolutely meeting standards are not. So we've got an inconsistency of standards that's being arbitrarily judged and approved. We're not giving some of the respect we should to the species teams where there's a fundamental knowledge. The welfare team, I really don't know what their role is.
Well, the thing is also, Sue, that the animal welfare team are predominantly have come across from the RSPCA, and their expertise is not in wildlife.
It seems
So,
to be enforcement, and it seems enforcement is a really big part of what Wire's head office see as their future.
yes.
So, are they going to then start enforcing the standards of all volunteer organisations that work in wildlife? Which means everybody is going to be fearful. We should be supportive, mentoring, um, coaching,
Mm.
training, sharing best practices, ongoing learning. There's so much positive stuff we could be doing.
Well,
And
it
all we're
seems like
doing
seems
is
like
we keep
head
on.
office are really failing in their duty of care by not following due process. And if they do perceive that there's an issue, not communicating with that member directly first to see if they need support or help or mentorship or education or any of those things. So they seem to be bypassing all of that and skipping straight to targeting people for raids and prosecution. That's what we're hearing constantly.
And it goes right back to 21. This is the issues. This has been going on now for 4 years.
Mm.
As I said, that's what we experienced with Kate, and we could not make head or tail of why anybody would want to do that.
None of it
Um,
makes sense.
no. Um, so that's what we keep fighting for. So
Mm.
we need to, I think the court case this coming week is about legal privilege. And then I think there's a real question mark about whether the SGM on the 21st is actually valid. As I said, there's about a dozen reasons why it shouldn't be. Um, for example, we don't know whether members that joined since September are allowed to vote. When I won members under our 2007 constitution should be voting. They've not been included. We should have a physical location. We don't. The meeting says it's running from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m., but voting finishes, 2 p.m. to 8 p.m., but voting finishes at 4 p.m. Are we going to have another one of these situations where people don't know whether they can vote when they get home from work at 6 o'clock or whether they need to do a proxy? The ambiguity is deliberate. People aren't sure what they can and cannot do.
Mm.
And there's more reasons as well. We shouldn't be having two separate SGMs from head office. There's a conflict of interest with Lynn Fowler chairing. Our constitution says that all the WSC reps should have a chance to speak at annual general meetings. That's not on the agenda, and they've not even been invited to. So it's breach after breach where it's being run one way and it's not being run in the interests of the organisation.
Mm.
So if the 21st goes ahead, I think it could be contested. And the fact that they didn't include the resolutions about the board members in that same meeting is why it's been brought forward from the 13th to the 26th by members.
Mm.
And this is our chance to drive the change we so desperately need.
Mm.
Everybody's just got to vote on the 26th. Please.
Yes. And this is why it's so important for people to, even though they don't want to, become educated and really get across this so that you know what you're voting for, because the potential for positive change is there, but it's going to take people to have a basic understanding of all of this and not listen to the noise that's coming from, you know, other groups or head office. To the contrary, there's a lot of
Um,
misinformation out there about why this group is doing what it's doing.
Well, it's
Um,
interesting as well. There's misinformation even about if we take out the four board members as proposed, and now Joseph has resigned, and it would leave only Mary and Casey, that means Wise would go into administration. So I've had another chair reach out to me and said, "Oh, but if we all vote for it, it means we'll go into administration, and none of us want that." I said, it doesn't mean that at all. We're not
Mm.
going in to go into administration. The two remaining board members can appoint a third board member to keep it going until they decide then to re-establish the WSC or whatever is decided as the best way forward.
Mm.
Um, so that in itself is misinformation to stop people from voting or to stop them from taking out all four of the board members, which have been instrumental in getting us to the position we're in now.
And when if those board members, those four board members are removed, there will be another four put into those positions in the interim prior to an AGM where there'll be a general vote for the new board. Is that correct?
I'm not 100% exactly sure on that. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there is an option to add another board member and have three. So you must have a minimum of three.
Right.
I think it would be better if there were more people representing more members, probably made up of WSC members.
Yes.
So we're getting back to what the 2007 constitution would be, and it would represent more of the state. Um, I've actually said I'm happy to step in and help Sarah because I've gone and done a company secretary's course last year with all the concerns that we're seeing. When you criticize other people, I want to do it from a position of knowledge, not just
Mm.
being critical. So I went and educated myself so I could step in and be of value, or at least, not criticize unfairly, I guess is the essence of it.
Great.
So I think there's a lot of really good people that would step up in the interim who want to get back. Got to be careful. We don't want to get back to the necessarily an old wires, but we want to get it back on track with the values that the organisation was founded on.
Get back to the foundations. Yep.
And then we can get back to caring and not be looking
Yes.
over our shoulder,
Yes.
worrying about who's going to be at the gate. We, you want to be at a point where anybody can come and inspect the facilities because you want to learn. That's what you want to get to.
Yes. Get away from this culture of fear, intimidation, harassment, that sort of thing.
To
Um,
supporting, nurturing,
yes.
mentoring.
And know that if someone is going to come and look at your facility, it's to just see where you can improve and where the organisation can help.
Or we share with each other what we do and we all learn from each other because
Yes.
one of the things I say about joining wires is the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know about wildlife. It's a
Mm.
sector where we don't have all the answers. And it's a brilliant way to engage with the community, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah,
And I
there's
think
so much.
in the past there's been a deliberate strategy of isolating members and discouraging communication. But fortunately, there's now hundreds of members who are openly communicating and mentoring each other. And I know that's always gone on, but it's great to see a large cohort of the members who are really getting together now
And
to
what,
to try and
the avian team I have the utmost respect for. I mean, statewide, to learn what's happening in other parts of the state outside Sydney Metro has been absolutely phenomenal. To have people like Gazelle Kaplan join our avian teams and share her knowledge, to have has somebody got this species, or that I can buddy up with somebody across branches and that. That's what we should be encouraging so much more of. And there's pockets of it which is being done so well.
Mhm.
But others are just pulling back because we just don't want to be a target. And we've got to get rid of that.
Absolutely, completely understandable. Hmm.
So I don't know whether I've answered all the questions you think that
I
people might have.
think, yeah, that's amazing. That's a really great overview of the situation. And, without being negative, it's just people need to understand what's going on in order, again, to vote for this positive change.
And to take action. Please just don't stand by, would be my comment. You know,
Yeah,
if you want the organisation to be the organisation you want it to be, then you have to actually stand up and vote.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you wanted to cover, Sue?
No, I think that's probably it. Yeah, I don't want to overcomplicate it. I hope I've answered questions pretty
You have
much.
answered many. Yeah. It's
All I'd
great.
say is if people want to chat as well, if people have more questions, I'm really happy for people to reach out. It's not just a video, it's about all of us talking with each other.
Yeah, and there's lots of opportunity now for people to ask questions and get the answers and um, yeah, thank you so much for all of that. That's amazing.
All right.
And hopefully, the result will be a great outcome on the 26th, in
Well, hopefully,
particular.
we don't have to wait much longer. This has dragged on far too long now, and everybody is over it. We just
Yeah,
need to be able to move forward.
yeah, absolutely. Great
All
finish.
right.